Hello, this is Earl Nightingale. I want to talk here about how you can learn to speak with strength and effectiveness. You know, I'm delighted to be working with Toastmasters. I've been to many Toastmasters meetings and delivered many speeches before your critical but friendly audiences, and I've never met a finer bunch of people. Learning to speak effectively to a group of people is a marvelous achievement. Time and again, you'll find it a source of tremendous satisfaction, and it's amazing how the ability can move you more quickly toward your goals. Toastmasters make 5-minute speeches. That rule has to go down in history as one of the wisest promulgated by man since the laws of Hammurabi, which date back to the 18th century B.C. It's true that we can be mesmerized for perhaps an hour by a truly gifted speaker with a wonderfully interesting and important message. But the odds against that rare event occurring at a given weekly meeting of a local Toastmasters club, well, they're astronomical. If the talk is interesting, 5 minutes passes all too quickly. If the talk is boring, 5 minutes do not represent too great a burden. I'd like to mention as a kind of first rule of making speeches that the cardinal sin in speaking before a group is to be uninteresting. It's up to the speaker to so arrange his talk that regardless of what the subject matter may be, it is of real interest to every person in the audience. Now, such an interesting talk can be put together and delivered on any subject whatever. An interesting 5-minute talk could be given on paper cups, patching a tire, resting in a hammock, or bathing a dog. It takes imagination and preparation, the burning of a little midnight oil perhaps. But it not only can be done, it is essential. It is the first responsibility of the speaker to make certain that it's done. The idea of effective communication is to transfer the idea in your head in a telling, interesting, and effective manner into the heads of your listeners. Do you have the ability to do that? Yes, you most certainly do. Our own great Emerson said, if you have something to say, you'll be given the power to say it. That's worth memorizing, and that's the key. If you have something to say, that's the key. You'll be given the power to say it. You have a subject, a picture in your mind, and you want to transfer it step by step as a building is moved from your mind to the minds of others. When the process is complete, you want your listeners to have the same picture you have. Now, if you can do that with real interest, humor, in a relaxed and friendly manner, you're a big success. And yes, you can do it. The subject of this message is to learn to speak with strength and effectiveness. Things that are strong, that are fashioned to last, built of quality, are usually typified by their simplicity. They are generally unadorned with useless spare gear and trappings that don't contribute to the main theme. The same is true in delivering an effective talk. Trim your speech of all irrelevancies, all discontinuities, all cliches. For example, never say each and every one. Simply say each one. It's stronger, more effective, leaner. Never, please, as long as you live, ever say, and last but not least, or without further ado. Those are cliches, tired, worn-out, beat-up cliches. They clutter, they're useless detritus. Clean your talk so that it stands lean and muscular with no excess baggage. Picture it as a new destroyer cutting cleanly through the water instead of a cluttered old tramp steamer laboring and wallowing along. When I have an important speech to make, I write it out first, every word and phrase. Then I edit ruthlessly to trim away every ounce of superfluous fat. Then read the speech aloud. If there are awkward locutions, and there are many words that work fine in print that are difficult to work with in a speech, words such as vouchsafe, for example, looks great in print, it's almost impossible to say. Look for pompous, affected speech, and cut it out, or reword it in a less formal, friendlier form. Take your subject and your speech seriously, just as you do your work, but don't take yourself seriously. Read the talk over a couple of times and time it as you do. If it's too long, cut. There's always something that can be cut out. I've been writing 5-minute radio programs for 18 years. I've written them on every subject under the sun, and I've never found one that couldn't be handled in 5 minutes in what I consider to be an interesting and informative way. It's true that you can't go into great detail. It's also true that you could easily talk for an hour on any subject. But it's also true that it can be handled in an interesting and effective way in 5 minutes. Such a speech is an hors d'oeuvre, not an 8-course meal. And with a little thought, imagination, and care, it can be delightful and delicious. If you can't think of anything to talk about, arbitrarily pick anything you see and write a 5-minute talk about it. A book, a table, a chair, the carpet, the town you live in, the state, your job, your child or children, your hobby, your main interest, your favorite food, music, architecture, automobile, color, part of the country or the world, why you like to walk in the rain or take long walks on the beach or in the country. Take any word that represents a concept such as love, honesty, justice, law, truth, honor, integrity, brotherhood. You could write a large book, 10 books, on any one of them. You can certainly write an interesting 5-minute talk about any one of them. Each of them paints a picture in your mind and imagination. Now transfer that picture into the minds of others. You know, there's an entire industry worldwide behind the glass tumbler you hold in your hand, the coffee you measure into the pot, the book on your desk, the paper you write on, the chair you're sitting in, the clothes you're wearing. Where did the necktie come from? Why do we still wear such an anachronism? Why the stripes? What about the stripes that run the other way? How about shaving? How did that get started? Why do we do it? If you own a set of encyclopedia, you have only to open any volume at random, and you have the topic for a most interesting 5-minute speech and the facts you need for it. Every word in your dictionary can be the subject of a most interesting speech, as can the alphabet. Do you realize that all 600,000 words of the English language, the richest, the most widely spoken, the most flexible and beautiful language on earth, are formed of the 26 letters of the alphabet? Every word in all the plays and sonnets of Shakespeare is formed of that small, incredibly productive alphabet. Amazing? Interesting? Sure, it's interesting. Nervousness comes from being unsure of our subject and our ability to effectively deliver it. By writing the speech out first, we can be sure of it. We can find real interest and excitement in it, and find the desire to communicate that information and excitement to our listeners. After reading your speech over a few times, a few notes on a card will provide all the keys you need to keep on course and end on time. Pausing and hesitation are normal in everyday conversation. Speakers shouldn't be nervous about having to stop and think for a moment or reach for a particular word. It makes the talk sound more spontaneous, more natural. And you should speak just as you would to one person, with no affectations, no stentoriousness, no phony gestures. It should come naturally, unaffectedly. And look at the people in your audience. Look at those in the back, at the sides, and those in the front and the middle. And as you look at them, try to be conscious of transmitting what you're saying to them, transmitting the feeling, the mood, along with the words. You know, Toastmasters has helped thousands of people get over their nervousness and fear of speaking. It's a matter of practice. The accomplished golfer isn't embarrassed when he steps up to the first tee, even though there's quite a gallery. Neither is the experienced tennis player, and the same is true of the experienced speaker. And at Toastmasters, you'll get that experience, the very best I know of. Yes, the job of the speaker is to be interesting. If he's lived up to that responsibility, his audience will be delighted to hear him speak and look forward to hearing him again. If humor comes naturally to what you're saying, use it. If it doesn't, if it's contrived, if it's dragged in by the heels just to be funny, forget it. It has no place in your speech. Don't try to be a comedian unless that very rare and wonderful talent happens to come naturally to you. It comes to very few, and most of us are glad. Humor is not essential by any means to a good speech. Good humor on the part of the speaker is essential. You might want to listen to this tape again occasionally. You'll find that you'll get something new from it each time you listen. Thanks for your attention. Let's talk about how to be more creative. Becoming more creative as a person is one of the most valuable things we can do. It will add profits to our business, to us personally, and it will richly enhance our lives for the rest of our lives. The creative person is as happy and as busy at 89 as he or she is at 39, and the creative speaker is a joy to listen to. When he speaks, others will often say, "Why didn't I think of that?" The important thing for all of us to remember is that we're all creative. It's as natural in children as breathing, as running and playing. But as we grow older, especially in our kind of highly technological society, our natural creativity is curbed and pushed under the surface. Ours is a pragmatic society, and we tend to forget that everything we use, everything we enjoy that's been produced by man, was once the creative inspiration of a single human being. Imagination is, quite literally, everything. And the more we can do to keep our imaginations alive and our creative quotients high, the more interesting our lives will be and the more interesting we'll be as persons. Our creativity lies just below the surface of our conscious minds, and there are ways to pump it up to the surface. The first and most important is to simply realize that it's there, and to start looking for it. The next step is to realize that we're most creative during periods of leisure. That's why people who are slaves to their work are seldom very creative. Our best creative thoughts and ideas come to us when we least expect them. They come in the shower, when we first wake up. They'll sometimes appear suddenly at 4 in the morning. They'll often come while we're driving or taking long walks, while dozing in the sun, sitting in the park, having lunch alone. Good ideas seldom come to us when we're actively engaged in our work. The plots for all the great stories written by Robert Louis Stevenson came to him in his sleep. He kept writing materials on his nightstand so that on awakening he could quickly make notes of his ideas. With a little practice, we can do the same. The creative person is never without something to write on, and makes notes as a regular part of his daily life. I use an electronic secretary in my car. Not long ago I had to make a 200-mile round-trip drive, and I filled an entire cassette with ideas that came to me as I drove along. Quite often your best ideas, as you probably know, will come while you're covered with soap in the shower. When they do come, simply walk out, dry your hands, and make a note of it. Ideas are like slippery fish. If they're not speared on the point of a pencil, they'll vanish as quickly as they came, back into the incredible and labyrinthine interstices of our minds, there to perhaps disappear forever. Many of these ideas will be wonderful topics for speeches. There'll be wonderful ideas to add interest and zest to your talks, but there will also be exciting and better ways to do what you do for a living, for earning more money, and they'll come as answers to knotty problems. Problems are things that are looking for solutions. Educating ourselves to become more creative is the best way I know to solve them. Habits tend to reduce the chances of getting good ideas. It's a good idea to deliberately change long-standing habits. If you always go to work at a certain time, start leaving earlier or later. If you're used to following a certain route to work in your car, take a different route. Eat lunch at a different time and place. Try eating by yourself once in a while with your paper and pencil handy to jot down any good ideas that come along. With practice, anyone can become wonderfully creative. Look for creative opportunities hiding in everyday situations. Not long ago in Fort Lauderdale, where I live, there was quite a storm, high winds and rain, and during the night the dinghy that was tied to my dock got loose somehow and drifted away. We found it several days later. A friend had seen it floating aimlessly, and he'd rescued it for us. The next day, lying by the pool, a wonderful idea came to me. A series of children's stories about a little dinghy that gets blown far to sea in a storm. Then, talking with my 11-year-old son about it, we came up with more than 20 ideas for stories. The dinghy's name is Rinky Dink, and we had it lost in the Sargasso Sea, in the South Pacific, in the Bahamas, at the South Pole, a whole series of children's stories I'm now working on in my spare time, all because of a storm and a lost dinghy. Lurking in every problem there is a corresponding opportunity. Forming the habit of thinking creatively about problems instead of simply worrying about them can have wonderful and quite profitable results. Creativity is in itself a wonderful subject for a whole series of speeches. How, for example, many of the world's greatest ideas and solutions to problems came to people during moments of leisure. Newton saw the apple fall while resting, and that triggered his discoveries. All happened during a quiet afternoon. Einstein got the theory of relativity while recuperating from a cold in bed. And you and I can get our ideas, the most interesting and profitable of our lives, during otherwise unproductive times. A great creative idea you get while driving to work can be worth more than 30 years of 8-hour days. And there is nothing in the world you and I can do that is more important than learning to develop our creative powers. If there's a single best way to make sure our minds are being supplied on a regular basis with the raw materials for creative ideas, it has to be the habit of continuing education. Digging through weekly news magazines is a good source, as well as good books. The more you expose your brains to the excellent brains of others, the more the sparks will fly, the more good ideas you'll get. Your speeches will come alive and sparkle with your newfound source of exciting materials. They'll crackle and send off sparks. But more than that, your new creative attitude will enhance every facet of your life, your personal, business, and professional lives. And you'll be learning a way to keep interest and charm in your life for all the years of your life. You know, the late Pearl Buck, the great Nobel Prize-winning author, reported that she learned more between the ages of 60 and 70 than she had at any previous period of her life. Her life was a daily adventure. She lived creatively. And you and I and our children can do the same. Start today to look for and write down the ideas that come to you. It may be slow at first. It's like trying to remember your dreams. It takes practice. But it's there, and you can find it with a little daily practice. Thank you.